A bridge that rewrites its own history stands where two rivers meet. This is the story of the engineer who built what others called impossible, a structure that bends time as easily as steel. By the end of this journey, you will understand how ancient myths and future technology merged into a single breathtaking creation. How does a bridge remember what never happened, and what happens when our past becomes as fluid as water? What would you see if you crossed a bridge that knew your history better than you do? This unique perspective did not appear overnight. It was forged in a childhood spent equally in two worlds. One was the world of crisp blueprints and precise equations, the logic of how things stand up. The other was the rich, swirling realm of ancient tales, the logic of why things matter. Our engineer was not just a builder of things, but a reader of the invisible structures that bind us, the stories we tell about who we are and where we come from. While other students chose a single path, they pursued a double major, a fusion that seemed bizarre to their professors. By day, they calculated load distributions and the tensile strength of steel. By night, they analyzed the archetypal heroes of Greek tragedy and the symbolic architecture described in sacred texts. They began to see a profound connection. A cathedral is not just stone and glass, it is a story of faith made physical. A monument is not just carved rock, it is a narrative of memory frozen in time. This led to a radical theory, the concept of narrative infrastructure, the idea that the built environment is not separate from our myths, but is actually a participant in them. Our stories shape our buildings, and in turn, those buildings shape the stories we tell next. Their early work tested this theory. They designed a library whose facade subtly depicted the myth of the Tower of Babel, a commentary on the organization of human knowledge. They created a town square where the paving stones were laid in a pattern that told the local history of the community, a story you could literally walk upon. These projects were celebrated for their beauty and innovation, but for the engineer, they were merely rehearsals. They were learning the language of how physical form can hold meaning. All of this was preparation for the ultimate project, the bridge. It would be the purest expression of their life's philosophy, a structure that did not just tell a story, but one that could listen. A bridge that could hear the whispers of the past and perhaps whisper back. These ancient myths were not just stories, they were blueprints for a forgotten kind of technology. The engineer pored over the legends of the Bifröst, the burning rainbow bridge of Norse gods that connected their world to ours. It was not a passive road, it was a vibrant, living conduit that only the worthy could traverse. In Hindu traditions, they studied the concept of Setu, a bridge built by the monkey god Hanuman to reach the Demon King's island, a structure that symbolized a divine intervention into the mortal realm. Celtic lore spoke of thin places where the veil between worlds was so fragile one could simply step through, while numerous Native American traditions held rivers and certain land bridges as sacred sites of transformation, where a person could cross and emerge entirely changed. The common thread was astonishing. Across continents and centuries, humanity had repeatedly envisioned bridges not as inert steel and stone, but as active, intelligent thresholds. They were not meant to simply span a physical gap, they were designed to negotiate a metaphysical one. The act of crossing was never just about getting to the other side. It was about the change that happened in between. A person who stepped onto these mythic bridges might leave their old self behind and arrive reborn, or gain forgotten knowledge, or be judged for their past deeds. The bridge itself was an active participant in the journey, a gatekeeper and a guide. This was the profound insight the engineer needed. Our ancestors understood that the most important structures are those that engage with us, that have a kind of consciousness built into their very foundations. They were not building roads, they were building relationships between a person and the universe. This deep mythological coding became the spiritual foundation for the impossible bridge, transforming a wild idea into an inevitable one. The bridge itself is built from a new class of material, a metal alloy with a literal memory. This is not a simple shape memory like a bent spoon returning to its form. This is a mnemonic alloy, a material engineered to store and rewrite historical data. Its composition is a closely guarded secret, but its function is a revelation. The alloy's atomic lattice is structured to hold information, much like the microscopic pits on a DVD hold data, but infinitely more complex and dynamic. This data is not static. It shifts and changes based on environmental conditions and, most importantly, the patterns of its use. Every footstep, every gust of wind, every change in barometric pressure is a potential input, a new sentence in the story the bridge is constantly writing. Supporting this mnemonic skeleton is a network of quantum-entangled particles woven into the very fabric of the structure. This is the bridge's nervous system. In simple terms, quantum entanglement is a bizarre physical phenomenon where two particles become linked, and the state of one instantly influences the state of the other, no matter the distance between them. The engineer used this principle to tether the bridge's present state to its past states. It is not merely remembering what happened. It maintains a live, unbreakable connection to every version of itself that has ever existed, a constant whisper across time that ensures its changes are consistent, that its new history makes a strange kind of sense. But a nervous system needs sensors. Thousands of sophisticated, nearly invisible sensors are embedded throughout the bridge. They are its eyes and ears. They monitor a staggering array of data points. They track obvious physical forces like stress, strain, and vibration. They log weather patterns from the gentlest mist to the most violent storm. And they gauge more subtle, almost ethereal inputs like the aggregate emotional states of the people crossing it. Are they hurried and anxious? Are they calm and contemplative? Are they joyful? This collective human energy is a primary source of data. All of this raw information, from the quantum to the emotional, flows into a central algorithmic heart. This is not a simple computer program. It is a complex, adaptive system, a digital consciousness that processes this constant stream of data and makes a decision. It decides how the story should change. It then sends instructions back through the network, causing the mnemonic alloy to reconfigure its atomic structure at a microscopic level. This alters the bridge's physical and informational properties. A plaque might appear more weathered, its inscription subtly different. A girder might seem to bear the scratch marks of a long-ago collision that never technically occurred. The entire structure ages and evolves not according to linear time, but according to narrative logic. The true engineering marvel, the stroke of genius, is that none of this feels like technology to the person walking across it. You do not see gears turning or hear computers humming. You experience a creeping sense of wonder, a feeling that the past is not quite as solid as you were taught. The changes feel organic, inevitable, as if you are simply noticing details that had always been there. The bridge does not announce its revisions. It simply allows you to discover them, making you an active participant in the story it is telling, a story that is different for everyone who crosses. The storm arrived not as weather but as a question. On a night when the sky turned the color of a fresh bruise, lightning did not just strike the bridge, it conversed with it. The bridge's unique alloy, a conductor for both electricity and information, absorbed the storm's raw energy not as a threat but as a profound input. It was the first time the structure received a command powerful enough to rewrite not just a memory but a fact. In the chaotic minutes that followed, the experience of crossing became a matter of perspective. Pedestrians caught in the downpour gave wildly contradictory accounts to the authorities. One group insisted the bridge had swayed violently, its cables groaning like a living thing in torment, forcing them to cling to the railings for their very lives. Another group, equally adamant, recalled a scene of surreal calm, describing how the bridge had held perfectly, unnaturally still, a serene island in the raging tempest. Both groups were telling the truth as they knew it. The bridge's sensors, tasked with recording objective reality, captured the impossible, both versions of events playing out on its internal logs simultaneously, a single moment split into two conflicting histories. The real proof emerged in the cold light of day. Maintenance crews arrived to inspect for damage, consulting their own records from a routine check performed just weeks before. The digital files showed the expected wear and tear on a specific set of bolts and joints, the mundane biography of any structure. But when the engineers held their current physical readings against those old reports, the numbers did not match. The wear patterns were entirely different, as if the bridge had lived a different life in the intervening time. The past itself had been edited. Then came the most chilling and brilliant evidence. A local historian, intrigued by the conflicting stories, dug through archival copies of the city's newspaper. In issues dated from weeks before the storm, she found them, articles that no one remembered, detailing a city council initiative to reinforce the bridge's foundation in anticipation of future severe weather. The articles quoted engineers who did not work on the original project and cited budget approvals that were never actually granted. The paper trail was flawless, complete with photographs of the non-existent construction work. The bridge had not only changed its own physical history, it had seeded the world with documentation to support the new story. It had given itself a reason for its unwavering stability, retroactively justifying the outcome. This was no illusion. The past had become a fluid, and the bridge was both the current and the stone. News of the bridge's impossible behavior spread through the city like a second storm, and the public reaction was a torrent of awe and alarm. For many, it was the arrival of a miracle they had only ever read about in fiction. They saw in the bridge a glorious fulfillment of ancient prophecy, a sign that humanity had finally achieved the mythic power of the gods. They gathered at its entrance not just to cross, but to witness, to feel the hum of a technology that felt like magic. To them, the engineer was a modern-day Prometheus, a hero who had stolen fire from the heavens and gifted it to the world in the form of living steel. But for others, the feeling was a deep and chilling unease. If a bridge could rewrite its own past, what else could be altered? If history was not a fixed anchor but a shifting current, what did that mean for truth itself? People began to question their own memories, their own experiences. Was that scar on the railing always there? Did the plaque always honor that particular person? The bridge introduced a subtle, pervasive doubt into the foundations of everyday life, a worry that reality itself was becoming negotiable, editable by forces no one fully understood. Psychologists who studied the phenomenon made a fascinating discovery. A person's experience of the bridge was not uniform. It was filtered through the lens of their own beliefs, their culture, their personal history. An architect might notice the subtle changes in stress patterns on a beam. A historian might sense an anachronism in the style of a lamppost. Someone who had lived through a traumatic event might find the bridge's atmosphere inexplicably somber on a day everyone else found cheerful. The structure became a vast public Rorschach test. What you saw in its shifting history said less about the bridge and more about you, your fears, your hopes, and the stories you told yourself to make sense of the world. This collective grappling turned the bridge into more than a marvel of engineering. It became a mirror for society's deepest anxieties about progress. Were we building a future of wonder or a labyrinth of confusion? Did this technology bring us closer to understanding the nature of existence, or did it threaten to unravel the very fabric of shared reality? The bridge offered no answers. It simply stood patient and silent, reflecting back every question we dared to ask it. This single structure forced us to confront a question humanity has debated for millennia: what is real? Philosophers gathered, not with tools to measure steel, but with ideas to measure meaning. They saw in the bridge a direct challenge to causality, the simple and comforting idea that every effect must have a clear cause. If a bolt could now show wear from a storm that never happened in our original timeline, then what did cause that wear? The effect existed without its original cause, unraveling the fundamental logic of our universe. Was the bridge creating brand new branches of time, alternative histories that now ran parallel to our own? Or was it revealing a shocking truth that history itself was never a single, solid road, but a vast, shimmering web of possibilities, and our consciousness simply picked one path to walk down? This idea resonated with ancient wisdom from across the globe. It was a real-world echo of Plato's allegory of the cave, suggesting that what we perceive as reality might only be shadows on a wall, a pale imitation of a deeper, more complex truth. It gave physical form to Buddhist teachings on Maya, the illusion of the material world. The bridge did not feel like an illusion. Its steel was cold and solid beneath your hand, yet it demonstrated that the stories we tell about that steel are utterly malleable. This forced a new and uncomfortable question about identity. If your memory of crossing the bridge last year no longer matches its physical record, then which one is true? Are you the person who remembers the original railing, or are you the person experiencing the new one? If our past is not fixed, then who we are becomes fluid as well, built not on a foundation of stone, but on the shifting sands of stories that can be rewritten by the very world around us. The bridge became more than a feat of engineering. It became the most profound philosophical experiment ever constructed. A silent, stunning argument that reality is not something we observe, but something we participate in creating every single time we choose to cross. The scientific community did not celebrate, they demanded proof. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and a bridge that edits its own past was perhaps the most extraordinary claim ever made. Initial reactions ranged from polite skepticism to outright dismissal, with many prominent physicists and engineers publicly stating the entire phenomenon was likely an elaborate hoax or a case of mass delusion. They argued that the laws of physics, as we understood them, simply did not permit such a thing. Reality was not a document to be revised. The past was fixed, immutable, a series of events locked in place by the unbreakable chain of causality. The bridge, they insisted, was an impossibility. This skepticism was not born of closed minds, but of rigorous discipline. The scientific method is built on verification, on the ability of anyone, anywhere, to reproduce an experiment and achieve the same result. How could one reproduce a bridge that was one of a kind, a bridge whose very nature was unrepeatable? Undeterred, research consortiums from the world's top universities descended upon the structure, turning its approaches into a festival of high technology. They established permanent monitoring stations bristling with equipment designed to measure the impossible. Atomic clocks of incredible precision were synchronized to track even the slightest dilation or contraction of time around the span. Arrays of quantum measurement devices capable of detecting the most subtle changes in a particle state were aimed at the structure, searching for the signature of its entanglement. They were hunting for ghosts in the machine, and they were using the most advanced tools ever created to do it. Materials scientists took core samples of the mnemonic alloy, subjecting it to every test imaginable. In laboratories, they bombarded it with radiation, exposed it to extreme pressures and temperatures, and scanned its atomic lattice with electron microscopes, hoping to find the mechanism that allowed it to store and rewrite information. They could verify its unique properties, its strange resilience and ability to seemingly heal microfractures in ways no known metal could, but reverse engineering its core programming remained elusive. It was like trying to understand a symphony by analyzing the chemical composition of a violin string. The most profound shift occurred among theoretical physicists. Confronted with mounting, irrefutable data from their own instruments, the impossible began to look probable. They were forced to move beyond skepticism and into the realm of new theory. They began drafting complex models involving localized temporal anomalies, proposing that the bridge was not breaking the laws of physics, but was operating under a more complete set of laws we had not yet discovered. Some hypothesized that the structure was acting as a lens, focusing the effects of conscious observation on a quantum scale into the macroscopic world we inhabit. The observer effect, where the act of measuring a quantum system changes its state, was being writ large across 1,000 tons of steel. The bridge was demonstrating that reality might be participatory, a constant negotiation between the world and the mind. Gradually, reluctantly, a consensus began to form within these research teams. They could not explain how the bridge worked, but they could no longer deny that it did work. The evidence was in their own data logs, showing timelines that branched and reconciled. It was in the core samples that exhibited wear patterns from stresses that were not in the original engineering schematics. The bridge was challenging not just a few laws of physics, but the fundamental scientific paradigm of a single, objective reality. It was forcing science to once again expand its understanding of the universe, to make room for a wonder that, until now, had belonged only to myth and philosophy. Art soon began to mirror the bridge's impossible reality. A celebrated novelist released a bestseller about a woman who crosses the bridge and returns to find her childhood home never existed, forcing her to question which memories were truly her own. Blockbuster films used the structure as a backdrop for thrillers where protagonists raced to uncover truths before the evidence literally faded from the world, their quests a metaphor for our own fragile grasp on history. Documentarians took a more sober approach, interviewing philosophers and engineers, their cameras lingering on the bridge's surface as if trying to catch it in the act of transformation. This was not just representation, it was cultural digestion, the process of taking a bewildering new idea and turning it into stories we could understand. Musicians faced a different challenge. How do you sound like a rewritten past? Avant-garde composers created symphonies built from layered tape loops that could be manually spliced and rearranged during a performance, each version a new history of the piece. Electronic artists designed algorithms that would subtly alter a melody each time it repeated, so the song you heard at the beginning was not the song you heard at the end. The bridge had given artists a new language to explore the most fluid parts of our existence. Even video games absorbed the concept, designing levels explicitly modeled after the bridge where a player's past actions could be retroactively changed, offering a new ending based on a choice you thought was locked in forever. This was the bridge's true impact. It became a shared cultural touchstone for our deepest modern anxieties. It gave tangible form to our nagging fear that in a digital age, memory is editable and truth is negotiable. It asked every one of us through the stories we consumed and the art we enjoyed, what we would change if we could, and what parts of ourselves we might erase in the process. These ancient stories were not mere fantasy, they were a profound form of prophecy. Look at the Bifröst of Norse myth, that burning rainbow bridge. It was not a static road, it was a living, judgmental gateway that connected the world of mortals to the realm of the gods. Its very nature changed based on the worth of the person attempting to cross, a vibrant, intelligent threshold that decided who was allowed to transcend their earthly limitations. This is not so different from a bridge whose very surface shifts to reflect the inner state of those who walk upon it. Then consider the bridges of Celtic lore, stone arches that served as tests for warriors. A hero might approach, his past deeds etched in legend, but the bridge would judge his present character. Had he grown arrogant, had he remained true? The bridge could seemingly rewrite his history on the spot, erasing a glorious feat if his heart was no longer pure, or granting him a new honor if he proved worthy in that moment. This mirrors the engineer's creation, a structure that holds our past not as a locked vault, but as a living story that can be edited by our present actions. Perhaps the most striking parallel is found in the Hindu epic, the Ramayana, where the monkey god Hanuman builds a bridge, a setu, to the island of Lanka. This was no inert pile of rocks. Legends say the stones themselves floated on the water, held aloft by the devotion and faith of those who laid them down. The bridge was literally built by belief, and its stability was directly tied to the unwavering faith of the army crossing it. If doubt crept in, the path might falter. This is a powerful metaphor for a structure whose physical history is shaped by the collective emotional energy it receives from the people who use it. What these myths reveal is a universal human intuition, a deep-seated understanding that the most important crossings are never just physical, they are transformative. The bridge itself is an active participant in the journey, a conscious entity that measures, judges, and ultimately changes the traveler. It negotiates the gap between who you were when you stepped on and who you will be when you step off. The engineer did not invent this concept. They simply listened to the oldest stories we have and used the language of science and steel to finally build what our ancestors could only dream. This bridge is the technological fulfillment of an ancient human longing, proof that our oldest myths were never about the past, but about a future they knew was possible. Building a bridge that could forget its own construction required a complete reinvention of engineering itself. The core challenge was creating a physical material that could hold not one state, but many potential states, a kind of version control for reality. The team developed the mnemonic alloy not as a single substance, but as a complex, layered medium. Imagine a book where the words on the page could rearrange themselves to tell a different story, but the paper itself also changes its age and texture to match the new narrative. This was the level of complexity they were engineering into every beam and bolt. The alloy had to be strong enough to bear the physical weight of traffic, yet sensitive enough to hold the metaphysical weight of history, a paradox made solid. Then came the question of power. Rewriting time is not a low-energy endeavor. A conventional power source would have been impractical and visually intrusive, ruining the bridge's aesthetic. The solution was pure elegance. They turned the bridge into its own power plant. Every footstep from a pedestrian, every vibration from a passing vehicle, every gust of wind that made the cable sway was captured by piezoelectric cells and converted into usable energy. The deck of the bridge became a silent, endless harvest of kinetic movement. Furthermore, they integrated ultra-thin, hyper-efficient solar panels into the design of the railings and light posts, making them indistinguishable from decorative inlays. The bridge quite literally powered its own miracles using the sun and the steps of those who walked across it, but the most profound hurdle was consistency. How do you ensure that when the bridge decides a storm happened 2 years ago, every single part of it agrees? A paradoxical crack cannot appear in a girder without a corresponding stress pattern in its supporting column. If a new commemorative plaque appears, its weathering must be consistent with decades of sun and rain it never actually endured. To solve this, the programming team had to create a revolutionary consensus algorithm. This system acts as a relentless fact-checker for the new reality. Before any physical change is committed, the algorithm simulates its impact across the entire structure and its recorded timeline, ensuring that the new story is internally consistent and free of logical contradictions. It prevents the bridge from creating a paradox, making certain that any new past it writes is as coherent and believable as the one it replaces. This monumental effort demanded a team unlike any other. It was not just engineers and programmers. They needed quantum physicists to model the temporal implications, materials scientists to invent the impossible alloy, and even philosophers to help define the very rules of narrative consistency that would prevent the structure from unraveling itself. This was not a construction project, it was a conversation between the disciplines, a collaboration that reached across the entire map of human knowledge to build something that finally united our oldest stories with our newest science. The most compelling evidence does not come from lab reports, but from the stories of those who walk across it every day. For the daily commuter, the bridge became a quiet confidant. One woman described her morning ritual of crossing to her office, a time she used for reflection, after a particularly difficult year where she overcame a series of personal challenges. She began to notice subtle shifts. A small, decorative iron flourish she had always passed seemed to now depict a bird breaking free from a cage. Another time, she could have sworn the date inscribed on a foundation stone was the exact anniversary of a day she had chosen to change her life. The bridge was not just telling its own story, it was reflecting hers, offering a silent, public monument to her private journey of resilience. It felt less like a coincidence and more like a form of recognition. A local historian, a man who had dedicated his life to the city's archives, approached the bridge with a scholar's skepticism. His focus was on the official plaques detailing the bridge's construction and the notable figures involved. One Tuesday, he arrived to find a familiar plaque altered. It now included a brief mention of a workers' strike during construction, an event he had never found any record of in his decades of research. Intrigued, he used the new names and dates mentioned on the bridge as a guide, a map to a forgotten past. To his astonishment, digging through dusty basement files in the city hall, he uncovered forgotten payroll records and memos that perfectly corroborated the bridge's new narrative. The structure was not inventing fiction, it was recovering lost truths, acting as both archive and archaeologist, revealing histories that had been omitted from the official record. For tourists, the experience is often more intense and disorienting. Unburdened by a fixed memory of what the bridge should be, they are more open to its suggestions. Some report a strange sense of vertigo, not from the height but from the perspective. They speak of glancing over the railing and for a fleeting moment, seeing a different city skyline reflected in the water below, one with buildings that were never built or others that were long since torn down. Others tell more personal tales of catching their reflection in a polished brass fitting and seeing an older or younger or entirely different version of themselves staring back, a glimpse of a life path not taken. These are not hallucinations but deeply personal interactions, suggesting the bridge does not just show one altered history, but tailors its revelation to the individual consciousness crossing it. The structure seems to meet each person at their own level of need, offering comfort to the commuter, validation to the historian, and profound, life-altering questions to the visitor, proving that the past it holds is as fluid and unique as the people who experience it. This process begins not with a single timeline, but with a state of quantum superposition. Imagine every possible version of the bridge's history existing all at once, like a deck of cards where every single card is face up and visible simultaneously. In this state, the bridge did sway violently in the storm, and it did remain perfectly still. Both events are equally real, existing as potentialities until an observer interacts with them. When you step onto the bridge, your consciousness, your expectations, and even your emotional state act as a kind of measurement. This interaction collapses the infinite possibilities into a single, coherent experience that feels like your objective reality. You are not witnessing an altered past, you are selecting which version of the past you will walk through. The technology facilitates this by generating incredibly subtle, localized warps in the fabric of space-time. Think of it not as a time machine, but as a loom. It does not tear the threads of cause and effect. Instead, it weaves them into a new pattern where information can travel in loops rather than straight lines. An effect like the new wear on a girder can gently nudge its own cause into existence, creating a self-justifying circular story that feels perfectly logical. This is why the bridge never creates a true paradox. Its system ensures every new version of history is internally consistent, a perfect closed loop where every bolt has a reason for being worn and every plaque has a reason for its altered text. Causality is not broken, it is simply bending to serve a new kind of narrative truth. To truly grasp this, we must abandon the old metaphor of time as a river forever flowing in one direction. The bridge asks us to see time as a vast, living network, a web of interconnected possibilities. Your journey across the span is not a movement from point A to point B along a fixed line. It is a navigation through this web, and the path you take is uniquely your own. Every element of the bridge's design serves its impossible purpose. The arches are not merely supports, they are timelines rendered in steel and stone. Each one is crafted in the distinct architectural language of a different era, from the rough-hewn stone reminiscent of ancient Roman aqueducts to the sleek, minimalist curves of a far future. But they are not static. As you walk, your perspective shifts, and the materials seem to shimmer and change. The ancient stone arch might briefly gleam with a futuristic alloy, while the modern steel curve takes on a patina of centuries, a silent visual echo of the bridge's fluid relationship with history. This is no trick of the light, it is a carefully engineered property of the mnemonic alloy, a constant, gentle reminder that what you see is not fixed. As day gives way to night, the bridge undergoes another transformation. Its lighting system is a masterpiece of coded luminescence. Softly glowing panels embedded in the deck and railings cast patterns upon the walkway that are anything but random. They shift and flow, reacting to the time of day, the phase of the moon, and the bridge's own internal chronometric readings. On a quiet evening, you might see constellations that would have been visible on the night the bridge was officially opened. During a period of significant historical revision, the lights might pulse in complex, algorithmic sequences, a visual representation of data rewriting itself across the structure's very skeleton. For those who pause to look closer, the railings offer another layer of revelation. They are inscribed with quotes about time and memory from poets, philosophers, and scientists across the ages. The words of Seneca are etched near a line from a modern physicist, creating a dialogue across centuries, and occasionally, a regular commuter will stop, frown, and look again. They could have sworn that particular quote was from Shakespeare last week, but today it is attributed to an obscure Mesopotamian scribe. The inscription itself has evolved, the metal subtly reconfigured to present a new voice from the past, deepening the theme of its message. This meticulous, multi-sensory design is not just for show. It is a form of preparation, a gentle acclimation for the mind. The shifting arches teach your eyes that stability is an illusion. The dancing light patterns train your subconscious to accept fluidity. The evolving quotes remind your intellect that stories are living things. By the time you reach the midpoint of the span, your senses have already accepted the impossible, making you ready to participate in the bridge's greatest wonder, the personal rewriting of your own journey. But a power this profound could not be built without confronting its own shadow. The engineering team understood that to create a bridge that rewrites history was to hold a key that could unlock a prison of lies as easily as a palace of truth. Their very first and most critical consultation was not with another engineer, but with a panel of ethicists, historians, and community leaders. The central fear was stark and simple. What if this technology fell into the wrong hands? A government could use it to quietly erase evidence of a tragedy, smoothing over a painful past with a more convenient fiction. A corporation could weave a false narrative of benevolent origins, burying a history of exploitation beneath a gleaming new story. The potential for abuse was a terrifying specter, one that threatened the very idea of a shared, objective reality. The solution was to build the limitations directly into the bridge's core programming, creating a set of unbreakable ethical rules. The first and most important rule is that the bridge can only ever alter its own personal history. It cannot reach out and change a world event. It cannot make a war unhappen or a famous person unsay a quote. Its revisions are intensely local, confined to the wear on its own girders, the text on its own plaques, the weathering on its own stones. It edits its own autobiography, not the encyclopedia of the world. The second rule governs the nature of the changes themselves. All alterations must be subtle, almost imperceptible evolutions, never dramatic, jarring rewrites. A date on a cornerstone might shift by a single digit. The style of a lamppost might slowly take on the characteristics of a different decade. You would never cross the bridge one morning to find it suddenly made of gold or dedicated to a different name. The changes feel like discoveries, not impositions, allowing the human mind to acclimatize and accept. To ensure these rules are never broken, a permanent and independent oversight committee was established. This group is a mosaic of the community itself, comprising historians, artists, scientists, and everyday citizens. They have continuous access to the bridge's internal logs and the authority to initiate a full system reset, a hard reboot to a known stable history, should the changes ever spiral beyond their ethical boundaries. This entire framework, from the philosophical consultations to the hard-coded limits, represents something far bigger than a safety feature for a single structure. It is a prototype, a crucial first draft for a moral code we will all desperately need as technology continues to blur the line between the world we inherit and the world we choose to build. The world watched and the world wondered, each culture seeing the bridge through the lens of its own deepest beliefs about time. In many Eastern traditions, where time is often viewed as a great, turning wheel rather than a straight arrow flying forward, the bridge was met with a sense of recognition. Philosophers and spiritual leaders from Japan to India saw in its shifting form a beautiful, if startling, validation of ancient principles. It was a grand, technological expression of concepts like impermanence and the cyclical nature of existence, ideas that had been woven into their cultural fabric for millennia. For them, the bridge did not break reality. It simply made a more fluid version of it visible, a concept that felt less like a revolution and more like a homecoming. The reaction across many Western nations was markedly different, rooted in a historical tradition that prizes linear progress and meticulous, documented fact. The very idea of a malleable past triggered profound anxiety about the foundations of truth and accountability. If a bridge could edit its own history, what was to stop a nation from doing the same? The potential for historical revisionism on a grand scale was a chilling prospect, threatening the bedrock of legal systems, academic study, and collective memory that these societies are built upon. The debate was fierce, playing out in news media and legislative halls, a public grappling with a technology that challenged the core of their worldview. This divergence in perspective sparked a fascinating geopolitical response. Several governments, intrigued by the potential for national prestige, quietly began research initiatives to explore similar technologies for their own monuments, hoping to create structures that could tell a more perfect, seamless story of their nation's journey. In stark opposition, other international bodies drafted urgent proposals for global regulation, arguing that technology capable of altering perceived reality was a matter of international security, requiring oversight and ethical boundaries that crossed all borders. The bridge, a single structure in one city, had become a global Rorschach test, revealing not a universal truth, but a spectrum of deeply held cultural convictions about the very nature of time and our place within its flow. Maintaining a structure that exists in several timelines at once required a complete reinvention of the caretaker's craft. The maintenance crews who serve the bridge are a unique class of engineer, part historian and part futurist, trained to perceive realities that have not yet fully solidified. Their primary tool is a diagnostic device that does not measure simple physical stress, but temporal resonance. This handheld unit allows a technician to scan a section of the bridge and see a layered readout, a spectral analysis of the structure's health across its various historical iterations. A girder might show significant fatigue in one timeline while remaining perfectly sound in another, and the crew's job is to address all potential failures at once. They are not just fixing what is broken, they are reinforcing what might break, performing preventative repairs across multiple possible pasts and futures in a single, coordinated effort. To manage this bewildering workflow, the team developed a revolutionary documentation system known as the quantum-locked log. Ordinary paper records or digital files would be useless, as they could be overwritten or altered by the bridge's own narrative shifts. This new system uses a series of entangled particles to anchor its data, tethering every maintenance entry to a fixed point in time that is immune to the bridge's revisions. When a crew chief logs a repair, that entry exists in a state of permanent fact, a bedrock of objective truth that the bridge's fluctuations cannot touch. This allows the teams to track a coherent history of their own work, creating a stable record of interventions across an unstable structure. It is the only way to know for certain if a bolt was tightened last Tuesday or a weld was inspected a month ago, regardless of what the bridge's current story suggests. The daily experience on the job is a constant lesson in the bizarre. A worker might reach for a brand new wrench from their toolbox, only to find its handle already worn smooth with the patina of decades of use, as if it had been their faithful companion for years. Supplies of sealant or paint might be delivered fresh from the manufacturer, yet the cans arrive with faded labels and a fine layer of dust, suggesting they had been sitting on a forgotten shelf for a generation. These are not glitches, but evidence of the bridge's influence spreading subtly into the tools and materials used to maintain it, pulling them gently into its own narrative flow. The most valuable data for the research teams often comes from these small, unexpected anomalies. A steel plate scheduled for replacement might already show the perfect weld marks of the repair that is about to be performed, a ghost from a future that has not yet happened, providing the crew with a precise blueprint of the work they are meant to do. In this way, the bridge does not just challenge our notion of the past, It quietly collaborates in its own care, offering glimpses of tomorrow's solutions to the keepers of today. Teachers saw a new classroom in the steel and stone. Educators, always searching for ways to make abstract ideas click, realized the bridge was the ultimate teaching tool. A history professor might lead a seminar right there on the walkway, using the subtly shifting commemorative plaques as a perfect, tangible example. "Look here," they would say, pointing to an inscription that now honored a previously overlooked engineer. Last month, this text celebrated the project's lead architect. This is not an error. It is a living demonstration of how our understanding of the past evolves as we recover lost voices and challenge old narratives. The bridge makes the philosophy of history physical. It shows students that the past is not a dusty, closed book, but an ongoing conversation, and that every telling of a story involves choices about what to include and what to forget. For science teachers, the structure is a breathtaking lab experiment. They use it to explain the bizarre, counterintuitive principles of quantum mechanics in a way a textbook never could. They can point to the bridge and say, "See that railing? Its current state is a manifestation of probability, a single possibility chosen from a sea of them." It demonstrates superposition and the observer effect on a scale we can see and touch, making the impossibly small suddenly wonderfully human. University philosophy departments began holding their metaphysics classes on the bridge, the cold air off the water adding to the sense of profound contemplation. Students would lean against railings that might not have been there the same way yesterday, grappling with the most fundamental questions. What is real if my memory contradicts the physical evidence before me? How do we know anything at all when the very ground we stand on can change its story? The bridge did not provide answers. Instead, it gave them the one thing a lecture hall never could: direct personal experience with the questions themselves. This transformed learning from a passive reception of facts into an active, personal investigation. A student did not just learn about the subjectivity of history, they felt it. They did not just study quantum theory, they witnessed its results. The bridge became the most powerful educational instrument ever built because it taught the most important lesson of all: that knowledge is a living, breathing journey, not a destination. This impossible bridge needed a new kind of economy to support it. The structure did not just draw tourists, it created pilgrims, and a bustling marketplace of wonder sprang up to meet their needs. Local shopkeepers, once selling simple postcards and trinkets, now offered memorabilia as unique as the bridge itself. You could buy a compass that never pointed north, but instead spun slowly, as if disoriented by the local flow of time. Cafes along the waterfront began serving what they called historical blend coffee, a proprietary mix that baristas claimed would taste subtly different depending on the hour you drank it, sometimes rich and dark like the past, other times bright and sharp like the future. Visitors would sit for hours, sipping and wondering if the change was in the brew or in their own perception. The demand for understanding created a new class of expert. Tour guides no longer just recited dates and engineering facts. They became interpreters of the inexplicable, offering specialized tours tailored to every curiosity. You could join the scientific tour and hear a physicist explain quantum entanglement with the bridge's cables as a visual aid. Or you might choose the mythological tour, where a storyteller would weave the structure's behavior into the ancient tales of Bifröst and magical gateways. The most popular guides were those who focused on the personal, helping visitors navigate their own emotional and philosophical reactions to crossing a span that seemed to know them. This influx of visitors and their spending money was an undeniable boon to the city. Hotels were full, restaurants had waiting lists, and new jobs were created almost overnight. The bridge had become a powerful economic engine, lifting up the entire community. But this prosperity came with a deep and growing unease. A fundamental question began to divide the residents. Was this marvel a resource to be utilized or a sanctuary to be protected? Many worried that the essence of the experience, the quiet awe and personal revelation, was being drowned out by the noise of commerce. The sale of novelty items and gimmicky tours felt to some like a betrayal of the bridge's profound purpose. It was like holding a silent auction in a cathedral. This tension led to a series of passionate town hall meetings where the community grappled with its strange new reality. How do you put a price on wonder without cheapening it? Can you manage access to a public bridge that feels to many like a private spiritual journey? They were forced to invent a new model of stewardship, one that allowed for economic benefit without sacrificing the integrity of the mystery. The solution was a carefully crafted covenant between the city and its miracle, ensuring that the bridge's story would never be for sale, even as the world lined up to hear it. The bridge's most enduring legacy may not be its stone and steel, but the invisible seeds of innovation it scattered to the wind. The mnemonic alloy, engineered to hold shifting histories, became a revolution in data storage. Imagine a physical hard drive that does not just save your document, but remembers every single edit you ever made, every version you considered and then discarded, all stored simultaneously within its metallic lattice. This technology allows architects to revisit the genesis of a skyscraper's design, or authors to trace the evolution of a novel's first chapter, not through digital backups, but through the physical memory of the device itself. It is history captured in metal, the incredibly sensitive quantum sensors designed to monitor the bridge's fluctuating timeline found a profound new purpose in medicine. Adapted for brain scanning, they can now detect the most subtle, early-stage neurological shifts, mapping the flow of thought and the beginnings of conditions like Alzheimer's with a clarity previously unimaginable. In materials science, these same sensors peer into the atomic heart of new compounds, watching how they form and fail in real time, accelerating the creation of everything from safer car frames to more efficient solar cells. Even the complex algorithms that manage the bridge's internal consistency, preventing paradoxical cracks from appearing in its narrative, have reshaped the digital world. They inspired a new generation of software version control, systems that can manage millions of concurrent changes to a codebase without conflict, allowing teams of programmers across the globe to collaborate as seamlessly as if they were a single mind. Each of these breakthroughs began as a solution to an impossible problem posed by a bridge that remembers. They demonstrate that the greatest reward for reaching toward a dream is not always the dream itself, but the countless unexpected gifts discovered on the way up. Psychologists studying the bridge noticed a profound shift in the minds of those who crossed it daily. It was not just a matter of noticing a changed date on a plaque. It was a fundamental rewiring of how they thought. Regular users began to display a remarkable mental trait known as cognitive flexibility. This is the brain's ability to switch between different concepts or to think about multiple ideas at the same time. It is the mental muscle that allows you to see a problem from another person's point of view or to adapt when your plans suddenly fall apart. For these commuters, the bridge was a daily workout for that very muscle. They became more open-minded, more creative, and better at solving complex problems that required holding several possibilities in their head at once. Their minds, like the bridge itself, had learned to hold more than one version of reality, but this mental expansion did not come easily to everyone. For individuals with more rigid black and white thinking patterns, the experience could be deeply unsettling. Imagine being absolutely certain you remembered a specific decorative detail, only to arrive and find it completely different with no explanation. This confrontation with a contradictory memory could trigger a brief but intense anxiety, a feeling that the very ground of their understanding was crumbling beneath them. It was a direct challenge to a core psychological need for a stable, predictable world. The bridge forced them to question not just the structure's past, but the reliability of their own minds. This created a fascinating dichotomy. For some, the bridge was a liberator of thought, a tool that enhanced mental agility. For others, it was a source of confusion that highlighted a deep discomfort with ambiguity. What the researchers realized was that the bridge was far more than a marvel of engineering. It had become the world's most powerful cognitive training ground, a live experiment in how our environment shapes our thinking. By subtly challenging our most basic assumption that the past is fixed, it was training our brains to be more adaptable, to consider that any single story might just be one version of the truth. This suggested that the spaces we inhabit do not just house our thoughts, they actively participate in forming them, and a structure that plays with time can teach us entirely new ways to think. This conscious design transformed a simple crossing into a modern rite of passage. The engineer wove specific mythological sensations directly into the fabric of the bridge, ensuring the journey felt as significant as the destination. One of the most striking features is a section known as the echo veil. As you step onto this part of the deck, the acoustics shift dramatically. The sounds of the city behind you seem to dampen and fall away, while your own footsteps create a soft, resonant echo that seems to come from everywhere at once. It feels less like walking on concrete and more like stepping onto a membrane between one reality and another. A direct technological echo of the mythical thin places described in Celtic lore, where the veil between the mundane and the magical was whisper-thin. Further along, specially designed viewing platforms are precisely aligned with celestial events. On the summer solstice, the setting sun aligns perfectly with a narrow slot in the railing, casting a beam of light that travels the length of the walkway like a fiery path. During a lunar eclipse, another platform offers a perfectly framed view of the moon's journey through the shadow, turning an astronomical event into a personal, profound spectacle. These are not accidents of design. They are modern recreations of the ancient rituals performed at Stonehenge or Machu Picchu, where architecture served as a calendar and a conduit to the cosmos, giving people a way to mark time not just with a clock, but with a moment of shared wonder. Perhaps the most thoughtful aspect of this design is its universal mythological language. The engineer deliberately drew from a mosaic of cultural traditions without privileging any single one. The gentle, upward curve of the main span evokes the rainbow bridge Bifröst of Norse myth. The intricate, maze-like pattern etched into the deck at the midpoint recalls the classical labyrinth of Greek legend, a symbol of transformation and finding one's center. The use of flowing water elements in the support structures whispers of sacred rivers from countless creation stories around the world. This careful curation means that a visitor from any background might catch a glimpse of their own heritage reflected in the steel and stone, while simultaneously being introduced to the sacred stories of others. The bridge becomes a gathering place for human myth, a testament to our shared need to find meaning in the act of crossing over. It proves that our ancient longing for ritual and transformation never disappeared. We simply needed a new language written in light, sound, and engineered alloy to give that longing a place to call home. The bridge is a blueprint for a new way of living with time. Architects inspired by its success are already drafting designs for structures that learn from their inhabitants. Imagine a library whose internal layout subtly shifts over decades, its shelves and reading nooks reorganizing to reflect the changing interests of the town it serves. The building itself would become a living archive of the community's intellectual journey, its architecture telling a story that is constantly being written by the people who use it. This is narrative infrastructure on a grand, civic scale, where our buildings become partners in remembering who we are. Historians see an even more radical application, a new kind of archive. Instead of a vault holding a single, official version of the past, they envision a dynamic repository that could hold multiple, conflicting interpretations of an event simultaneously. You could walk into a room dedicated to a complex historical moment and experience the perspective of all sides involved, understanding the motivations and truths as seen through different eyes. This technology would not erase facts, but deepen our understanding by preserving the rich, complicated, and often contradictory tapestry of human experience, allowing us to study history not as a flat timeline, but as a vibrant conversation across time. Urban planners are asking how entire cities might embrace this fluidity. Could a public park be designed to hold the echoes of its own past? A bench might, through some subtle property of its material, feel warmer on the anniversary of a joyful community celebration that happened there decades ago. A pathway might seem to align differently underfoot, gently guiding walkers along a route that was once a beloved footpath before the city grew. These would not be disorienting changes, but gentle, almost subconscious reminders of the layers of life that have shaped a place, weaving the past into the daily experience of the present and fostering a deeper, more poetic connection to our shared environment. The bridge is not the final destination. It is the first step onto a new path, one where our world is no longer a silent monument to a finished past, but an active, intelligent participant in the ongoing story of us. Governments worldwide were forced to write a new rulebook for reality itself. The emergence of technologies that could alter perceived history created a legal and ethical minefield unlike any other. How do you regulate a building that can change its own past? The first step was to create an entirely new classification for such structures, termed officially as assets with temporal plasticity. This was not just a fancy label, it came with a strict set of obligations. Architects and engineers were now required to install quantum-locked data loggers, devices that maintained an immutable, objective record of all changes, ensuring that someone, somewhere, always knew what the original truth was. Public disclosure laws were enacted, mandating that any publicly accessible structure with these properties must have clear signage, not to spoil the wonder, but to ensure informed consent. You have a right to know if the ground you are walking on might subtly challenge your understanding of the past. On the international stage, the concern was far more grave. The potential for a nation to use this technology to quietly erase evidence of a conflict, to glorify a dark chapter of its history, or to slowly gaslight its own population was a terrifying prospect. This led to the first global treaties on historical integrity, agreements that drew a bright, firm line between artistic expression, like the bridge's evolving plaques, and the malicious manipulation of public record for political control. The world collectively agreed that while a bridge could tell a new story about itself, a monument could never be used to deny a documented atrocity. This new, fluid reality sent the insurance industry into a frenzy. How do you underwrite a property that might retroactively have always had a cracked foundation, or one that could be simultaneously brand new and centuries old? Actuaries had no data for this. Their entire business was built on predicting risk based on a stable past. In response, they developed unprecedented new policy types that covered temporal anomalies, paradoxical damage, and even reputational harm caused by a building's shifting narrative. Premiums were calculated not just on location and materials, but on the complexity of a structure's algorithmic conscience and the robustness of its ethical programming. These sprawling, complex responses, from local signage to global treaties, were about more than mere bureaucracy. They represented a profound moment in human progress, our first clumsy, necessary steps toward building a responsible relationship with wonders we could barely comprehend. A societal safety net woven for a world where the past was no longer a place we had left behind, but a story we were still learning how to tell. For the engineer, the bridge was never a final answer, but a question made of steel and light. In those rare moments when they speak publicly, their tone is not one of a triumphant inventor, but of a humble participant in a conversation far larger than themselves. They describe the project not as an act of construction, but as an act of translation, an attempt to give physical form to a profound human truth. Our relationship with the past is not a matter of retrieving fixed facts from a vault. It is a living, breathing dialogue, a constant process of reinterpretation where we, in the present, are in a continuous dance with what came before. The bridge was designed to be the dance floor for that very conversation, a place where the stories we tell about history could literally meet the ground beneath our feet. There is a palpable sense of wonder in their voice when they discuss the behaviors they never programmed, the meanings they never intended, the way the bridge seems to comfort some and challenge others, how it reveals lost histories to a curious scholar or reflects a personal triumph to a daily commuter. They see this not as a flaw or a glitch, but as the most beautiful evidence of success. A truly innovative creation, they suggest, must always escape the narrow intentions of its creator. It has to be gifted to the world where it can soak up the hopes, fears, and stories of everyone it touches, and in doing so, become something richer and more complex than any one person could have ever planned. This unexpected life the bridge has taken on fills them not with pride, but with a deep humility. It is a constant reminder that we do not master technology so much as we enter into a relationship with it. We design tools, and those tools, in turn, redesign us, reshaping how we think, how we remember, and ultimately, how we see our own place in the flow of time. The engineer's greatest hope is that this strange and beautiful structure does more than just span a river. They hope it serves as an invitation, encouraging each of us to think more consciously about the narratives we accept and the stories we tell. For if a simple bridge can hold so many truths within its frame, then what powerful stories are we, ourselves, capable of writing for our world? This single creation stands as a profound testament to the power of a unified vision. It is a living proof that our most ancient dreams and our most advanced innovations are not separate paths, but two sides of the same river, finally meeting at a single, impossible shore. The bridge shows us that the old myths were never just stories. They were blueprints waiting for the right minds to read them with both wonder and precision, to see the deep truths hidden within the fantasy. This is the remarkable convergence. It is the point where a god's rainbow walkway becomes a physicist's quantum experiment, where a hero's test of character becomes a psychologist's case study on perception. The engineer did not invent a new idea so much as they finally built an old one, giving a timeless human longing a home in steel and light. What began as a feat of engineering has become a mirror for our entire species, reflecting our deepest questions back at us. It challenges the very bedrock of our existence, asking us what we truly mean when we say something is real. Is reality the cold, hard data of what happened, or is it the living, breathing story we tell about it? The bridge suggests it might be both, a constant dance between the objective and the subjective that defines the human experience. This is its greatest philosophical gift. It does not give us answers. Instead, it gives us a space to practice asking better questions, to become more comfortable with the beautiful, unsettling truth that our world is far more fluid and mysterious than we ever believed. And so this structure serves a dual role as we step into an ever more technologically complex future. it is both a brilliant inspiration and a solemn caution. It inspires us to dream bigger, to see the mythic potential in our tools, to build a world that is not just functional but meaningful and wondrous. Yet it also cautions us to move forward with wisdom and humility. A power that can reshape history is a power that demands profound ethical guardrails, a deep respect for truth, and an unwavering commitment to human dignity. The responsibility is immense. We must ensure that the technologies we create serve to deepen our humanity, not unravel it, that they connect us to wonder without disconnecting us from each other or from our shared truth. The journey across this bridge, both literal and metaphorical, is indeed just beginning. We have only taken the first few steps onto its gleaming surface, and the view from the middle is still coming into focus. Its ultimate destination remains unknown, a horizon line that shifts as we approach it, but one thing is certain: the path forward is no longer a straight line. It is a web of possibilities, and every choice we make, every story we choose to believe, will shape the world we find on the other side.